All right. You're probably like me, where you have lots of questions about the January 6th incident. I've had guests on, such as Jacob Chansley, the shaman of January 6th. I've had other guests on as we try to get to the bottom of what happened on that day. I certainly don't condone what happened, but I have with me today a former FBI whistleblower who came forward about how the FBI was unfairly targeting American citizens. And he ended up, he's had his whole life turned upside down in pursuit of telling the truth. I want to thank Steve Friend for coming on today. Steve, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So, as I read through your bio and the internet and watched other interviews that you've done, man, this has been probably an unexpected year for you, right?
Yeah, I like to say I've lived about a decade in the last 12 months. It's been definitely an ordeal. I didn't expect it. When I came forward, there really wasn't a moment that I had a clear thought of I'm going to become a whistleblower. I just had concerns because I had experience as an agent, and I just want to do things the right way. And I don't believe that the FBI is doing that now, and is continued to just devolve into further and further off the rails.
Okay. And I've had other whistleblowers on. Colonel Tony Schaefer was a whistleblower for 9/11 and some of the cover up there. And so people appreciate your courage, even though I know it's probably upended your life and made things very difficult. So really quick, just for some background, before you were reassigned to the January 6th, I guess, task force or unit, before that, you were helping with violent crimes, human trafficking, taking out child predators. Is that right?
Well, the lion's share of my career was actually on Indian reservations in the Midwest. About 7 years, I worked in Iowa and Nebraska, and then transferred to Florida in 2021 to work on child pornography and trafficking cases. And we were in the summer and came up on the new fiscal year, which you have the budget debate going on now about September 30th as the new fiscal year rolls over October 1st. And the decision was made in my office to move manpower around, and I was voluntold to work on domestic terrorism in my office, and child porn was going to be no longer a resource going further. So I was the domestic terrorism guy on a joint terrorism task force in Daytona Beach, Florida, which meant almost entirely January 6 cases that had already been investigated, but they were still on the books.
Okay, interesting. I actually worked with a couple different agents in the Miami FBI office to get a Ponzi scheme person thrown in jail for 25 years. So I've worked with the Florida office. So you're moved off of what you've been doing over onto the January 6th situation, and then what were the first, I guess, red flags that started going up that, wait a minute, something's not right. We're targeting people, we're inflating numbers, we're taking our focus off of things that seem really important to go after people that maybe hadn't committed big crimes. What was the first indication or red flag for you?
Well, I had spent my entire career sort of as an independent operator, really wasn't working with others, just doing my own cases. So I was pretty familiar with the way the FBI runs its cases. And when I saw the way that January 6 cases were being very uniquely handled, I had immediate questions. And this incident is a one-time incident in a one-time location. You could have a million subjects in this case, but instead the decision was made that they were going to open up a separate case for every single person. And then also wherever they lived, that office on paper would be in charge of that case. But when I talked to the other people that had been handling those cases, they were still taking directives from Washington, D.C., basically being told, open up a case, we'll fill it with everything that needs to be in there, and then just tell you when you need to go arrest them. And I was immediately concerned about that, not because I had any sympathy one way or another for any subject, but I'm a system idealist and I believe in due process. And I think if you're departing from your rules, there needs to be a reason for that, because if you go to trial, if it's a righteous case, you will lose. I've been to trial 8 times in my career, so I know those pitfalls. And unfortunately, most FBI agents don't know. So I actually came forward with a concern about that. And then having been assigned to those cases for a little bit more, eventually when it came time to arrest an individual in my office, I objected to, because we were sending SWAT to his house when he had pledged to be cooperative. And I thought that that was an unnecessary risk to his safety and to our safety, especially because it had been about 18 months since we'd had any contact with him, because the case was being filtered through this conveyor belt in Washington, D.C., where they're just trying to work all the cases through. And I raised my concerns with that as a guy who did SWAT for 5 years. So it was really a twofold concern on my part.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can't imagine. Like, I've dealt with lawsuits and stuff because of business. I can't imagine a SWAT team showing up after I've told my lawyer I'm going to cooperate. We will come in. We're here to work together. That would be that would be very, very scary. I found this out like a year after January 6th, but my chiropractor's wife was at the rally. She was on a different part. It wasn't where they were rioting. And she was led into the Capitol. And she said, everybody was really nice. People were taking pictures. Next thing, she's being informed that you're going to be arrested. Her name was splashed all over the media. She lost her job. Their business dropped. They were doing everything they could to humiliate someone who was there peacefully protesting and then was invited into the Capitol. So were you seeing, I know that there were people smashing windows. I know that there were people doing violence towards the police, but were you seeing those cases as well as the people that hadn't gone into the Capitol or hadn't caused violence or destruction?
Yes, both of those type of cases existed in our office. And I had the opportunity to sit in actually on an interview with a gentleman who had a very similar situation to the woman you just described. He went to the president's speech, he walked over to the Capitol, and then actually asked permission from the Capitol Police to go inside. He was a dual citizen, so it was his first trip, and he just wanted to go in. He said, "I just wanted to admire the Capitol building." Went in and took a brochure with him, which he said was a souvenir, and didn't take anything else, didn't damage any property. But this was a guy who now had lost his job, his freedom was in jeopardy, and was in a lawyer's office when he was talking to us. So he had a financial penalty. So even if there's no charges brought, he was definitely being punished. And that's where the process becomes the punishment for so many of these people.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think about the fact that just hiring a lawyer to defend yourself could bankrupt somebody or really cause problems for that individual. Were there specific actions that you witnessed that led you to believe that the FBI had become politicized or were exaggerating the threat from these Donald Trump voters to be labeled as domestic extremists or violent extremists? What was going on with that situation?
Well, I'm a balls and strikes guy, so I go after the bad guy no matter where they fall on anything. So I was not really, there was no political leanings one way or another. But shortly after I arrived to my office in Florida, there was a black nationalist extremist who killed a police officer, and I asked why weren't we investigating this group that was involved with it, and we were told, well, they're not a predicated group. And this was 2021, so we saw 2020 where all this civil unrest happened, and there really wasn't any action from the FBI or the federal government at that point. And that's when I started getting my antenna up about it. And then the way that they've manipulated these cases with January 6th, where they've taken one case and now turned it into thousands of cases and spread them around the country. So if somebody's in Daytona who happened to walk through the Capitol, on paper, it looks like there's a terrorist in Daytona. That's the way that the stats have been manipulated and created this false impression. And what folks don't understand, and this is something that is bipartisan. This should not be impacted by who you vote for. The FBI has a quota system. It's called integrated program management. And there's a very big desire now for domestic terrorism, and it vastly outstrips supply. So this was a boondoggle for the agency to justify its existence, to justify an enhanced budget. And the worst part is the senior executives in the FBI get bonuses when the quota is met. So you have these high-ranking officials getting $30,000 to $50,000 every single year.
Wow. Okay. So you were seeing them not not go after cases that seemed like something the FBI should be involved in, but then spending time on a 70-year-old man who walks into the Capitol and takes a brochure?
Yes, that, or there's always pressure to open cases that just don't seem, it's a square peg in a round hole type of situation. I was pressured to open a full ISIS investigation on an individual who had no connection to ISIS. It was, you want to talk about like three hops. It was somebody in a chat room who talked to somebody else in a different chat room, talked to a third person in a different chat room. And in that fourth chat room, there was a ISIS beheading video. So we were pressuring ourselves to open up an ISIS case because we didn't have an ISIS case.
Yeah.
And we needed to check the box on that so the bosses could look good.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Interesting. This is insightful. So what made you decide to become a whistleblower? And did you have any idea that you would be treated the way that you've been treated?
I did not have any inkling that I was going to be mistreated the way that I was. I came forward to my frontline boss first name basis. The office I worked in only had about 8 agents, so we would go to we'd have 4th of July barbecues at each other's houses. That's sort of the work environment we had, and I just came to my boss Greg and said, "Look, I'm worried about the way we're running these cases because I think they could be jeopardized. I'm also worried about the use of SWAT because it could be dangerous." And I actually offered to work alternative duties. There was this arrest that was coming up. Multiple people were going to be apprehended. And I said, look, I am fearful that we're abusing people's rights. Can I be a conscientious objector in some way and do another responsibility that day? There was a wiretap in my office. I said, look, I'll sit on the wire. I'll monitor that for us. It has to be monitored anyway. And he immediately said no, and that I was jeopardizing my career, which was a shock to me. But then once the wheels started moving, it really devolved pretty quickly. I mean, that was on a Friday. The next week on Tuesday, I had meeting for about 2 hours with the next line up of the chain of command. They put me AWOL for the next day and told me I wasn't allowed to come to work during the operation. And when I came back to work the following week, I had a meeting with the highest level of my chain of command in the Jacksonville division, the special agent in charge, where she made some pretty egregious allegations that I was a conspiracy theorist, and told me at that point that they were looking at suspending my security clearance and investigating me. And that is the hack around the whistleblower protection that people believe that all government workers or even just private industry workers are entitled to, the Whistleblower Protection Act. But the FBI has found the workaround, and that is the security clearance. Because if you don't have an active security clearance, you can't work in the FBI. They suspend it for a trivial reason, and while they investigate that trivial reason, you're unpaid, indefinitely suspended, and they hope that you resign because of just financial reasons. So when the rubber met the road, 30 days after my first coming forward, and I was escorted out, my actual suspension from duty was for looking at government documents improperly, the government document being the employee handbook.
The very thing you should be referencing is the thing that they're now trying to nail you with.
Yes, I actually went to look at it because I was pretty familiar with how things worked in the FBI at that point. It had been about 9 years, but my lawyer, I'd gone to for help because I kind of saw the writing on the wall. He said, "Can you get me anything you can about the disciplinary process? I've never defended an FBI employee, but any sort of literature you can get me would be great." So it's an unclassified document, just how you would take maternity leave or document that your time or something like that. It's something that's just not really a state secret. Got those documents for him and sent them out, and the FBI said that I did that improperly, and that necessitated a review of my security clearance.
Wow. Okay. Let me try to get into the mind of the FBI here. Was there a feeling? Okay, let me start over. So there have been people in government that have come forward, and they've tried to say that the January Capitol breach was as bad or worse than the terrorist attack on 9/11. That's a huge jump, right? Like jumping from one chat room to another chat room and then somebody's beheaded, right? Okay, so they're saying these things, right? Most Americans are like, dude, there's no way. Like 3,000 people died, a couple people died, and a couple that died were not even the same day. It's horrible. It's terrible. I'm completely against this day, right? But to compare the two doesn't really make a lot of sense in my brain, right? But within the FBI, did agents have a feeling, or did upper management have a feeling that they were legitimately tracking down terrorists as bad as the 9/11 attacks?
Certainly not my experience. I think the
Okay.
regular agents sort of saw that this was a directive from on high and they were just following orders, which again, I question that. I don't think that you swear an oath to the Constitution to just follow orders if they're violative of your morals, your ethics, or the Constitution of the United States. But the gap between the rank and file and the executive level, the management level. Now they compare January 6th to September 11th. And there's a political narrative to that. It's very charged language. But I'm always struck by the language from within the FBI where they'll say, this is our 9/11. And the reason they're saying that is it's not because of the magnitude of the case for the death toll or damage or anything like that. The magnitude of the case will allow them to put their hooks into this case, put it on their resume to promote within the agency. They can always say they had some sort of managerial responsibility of the largest, most comprehensive investigation in the history of the FBI. You can pretty much write your ticket up the chain of command.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Okay. So it's not like a matter of, they say follow the money, but follow the prestige on a resume, right? That your curriculum vitae will look more impressive and shiny because you were a part of this major investigation during this affront, this crisis on the American people, the American capital. Okay.
This entire promotion process within the FBI is completely broken. People are always trying to find things that they can claim credit for, even if they didn't have any responsibility for it. There's a very well-known story about an individual who was sitting in the command post of the Boston Marathon bombing. We're talking about hours after it happened, who was typing it up, something to put on his resume.
Hours later, not even at the scene of the crime. Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, so they basically say, hey, listen, you're a horrible, terrible human being. You've looked at an unclassified handbook on how to be within the FBI. What happens now? Do they take your gun and your badge? Or what? Tell us about that.
September 19th, 2022, arrived at the office and was met there by my frontline supervisor, the next level up, the assistant special agent in charge, and the special agent in charge, and a security officer. They confiscated my gun, my badge, my credentials, everything, and escorted me from the building. And that was really the first in a long line of usurpations that I suffered as a result of the FBI. The story most people know ends there, but there's a lot more that comes after that. And that would be my wife losing her job within a few weeks under some very suspicious circumstances, her Facebook account being removed for violating community standards when she sent a private message to somebody saying that she was my wife, the FBI leaking my medical information to the New York Times and telling the Times that I was accused of shooting a firearm in my backyard, an email that I received where they attempted to put a gag order on me and told me I couldn't talk to my family or my friends or even an attorney about what was happening. I requested outside employment because you're unpaid. You need their permission, though, to work. They rejected that within one day. I requested my training documents because I was looking at actually going into law enforcement locally. They denied me my training documents. And then when they gave me my training documents and the agency went to check on them, they said, we can't confirm or deny that they're actually authentic. So they rendered them useless. So this was about 150 days until ultimately I was offered a fellowship at the Center for Renewing America and wanted to accept it. And my attorney said that if I did not resign first, that the FBI would most likely look to prosecute me for some reason, one way or another. And the last thing I'll add too is I had to do a compelled interview with the security division, during which they tried to get me in what we call a 1001 trap, where you lie to a federal agent and they can charge you with the crime. They tried to put me in some sort of like pincer trap, but fortunately I've done enough interrogations in my time that I could kind of see that coming and tiptoe around that.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Wow. I remember when I was helping take down a criminal with the FBI, my own attorney said, never say anything definitively, because if they flip on you, they'll send you to jail for saying something wrong, not even lying. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like, this is insane. Okay. So really quickly, I see your shirt. What is the Center for Renewing America?
This is it's a policy institute. They have a 501c3 that proposes policies about getting rid of woke and weaponized government, addressing concerns from more conservative bent. They had an opening for domestic intelligence and domestic security knowledge. So basically knowing how the FBI sort of broke in and making recommendations for change and really advising like the weaponization committee. So I kind of fit that bill really well, applied for it, despite what the Democrats in Congress alleged. I actually applied, did an interview process, provided writing samples like you would, and was selected for it, and I have been doing that since, and also trying to do outreach within my own community with the sister organization, the Citizens for Renewing America, and that's about organizing grassroots because I'm a pretty firm believer in fortifying your local area, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate.
Okay, interesting. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, so then what is the process? Is there like a hotline for whistleblowers, or how do you decide you're going to become a whistleblower and knowing that you're going to be called up to then testify publicly?
Well, there's actually training every year that you're supposed to take on whistleblowing. The FBI provides it, they're required to. It's annual training and virtual, but the law is 5 USC 2303. And it basically says you have to come forward with a reasonable concern of waste, fraud, abuse, or risk to the public safety. And you have to bring those concerns forward to the proper, appropriate reporting authority. That could be your frontline boss. The first time I walked in my boss's office, that technically is whistleblowing. I did that. I went up my chain of command. I also submitted a written declaration that I sent to Congress, to the House Judiciary Committee, to the Senate, to Senator Grassley, to Senator Durbin, to Senator Ron Johnson, and multiple members of Congress, and the Inspector General's office, the Special Counsel's office, and anybody that I could that was included in the statute, because I wanted to make sure I covered all the bases. And once I submitted that declaration, the Congress flipped over to the Republican side in 2022 after the midterm elections, and they established this select committee on the weaponization of the federal government. They got in touch with me and asked me to participate in a transcribed interview, which is like a deposition, and then ultimately in May come and do a public hearing, which I participated in.
Okay, how scary was that?
You know, it was an experience, but I've testified hundreds of times. So for me, I think it was less of a nerve-wracking experience than a person who doesn't have that experience, which is why I was sort of disheartened by the outcome, because I felt like that was a golden opportunity between myself and Garrett O'Boyle, who's also testified so many times in his career. We really could have brought out the information. I felt a little bit better, but it's Congress, so they like to get their 5 minutes to monologue and get on TV.
Yeah, I'd be a train wreck. I'd make up some story like Donald Trump tried to choke his limo driver. Just kidding. Okay, so going forward, okay, I want to understand this whistleblower thing just a little bit better. And I don't want to take you off topic. I know this has nothing to do with you, but like there's big whistleblowers right now. Like one is trying to say, hey, the government has all this UFO stuff. And I'm just curious, I don't need you to opine on UFOs or anything, but like, is this guy who's come forward as a whistleblower against the military and the government and the CIA and the FBI and all, is this guy's life about to be upended, or is he going to be protected?
The question is, did he follow the statute? We use this term whistleblower a lot, and it's like a pop culture thing.
Okay.
And it's just somebody who exposes something now. That's generally what people believe it to be. But they actually have to have a reasonable concern and bring it to the right authorities. They can't just go to the media. If I'd gone directly to the media, I would not be a whistleblower. I would not be afforded that protection. So I don't know what hoops that the DOD quote unquote whistleblower went through, if he actually reported to the proper authorities or not. I don't know if it was adjudicated or not. And here's the biggest thing with whistleblowing that nobody seems to grasp. And certainly the Democrats that were pretty adversarial have said, well, I'm a self-styled or a self-alleged whistleblower. They've never called me wrong. And I don't have to be right. I just have to be reasonable. And I think the case that I've articulated to you is pretty reasonable. And it's incumbent on them to actually investigate it. I've never said I wouldn't go back to work. I had a concern. They should say, okay, Steve, we will investigate this. And I would have gone back to work. They could have said, you're right, we're going to change course. And I got back to work. They could have said, you're wrong, and here's why. And I would have gone back to work. the bottom line was, though, that they circled the wagons and attacked the messenger, which is not in keeping with the Whistleblower Protection Act that's supposed to afford you some sort of bulwark against a retaliation.
Wow. Wow. Unbelievable. Okay, you have a book out called True Blue, and you walk through in greater detail about this and about your life. What is the best way for people to follow you? What is the best way to get their hands on a copy of True Blue?
Yeah, right now the best way to do it is through my social media. So on Twitter, or now we call it X, it's at Real Steve Friend. It's pinned to the top of my profile. You can get a copy over at Amazon. True Blue, my journey from beat cop to suspended FBI whistleblower. It's a personal memoir about my time as a police officer, as an FBI agent, and then gets really into the details of the whistleblowing process. And I will tell anybody, I submitted the manuscript to the FBI, told them I intended to publish it, and they wanted significant portions of it redacted. I have not done that. It's all in there. So you will get a full accounting of my experience.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming on the show. I'll make sure to put a link down below directly to your book so that those that want to go and support you can do that. I'm so sorry for everything that you've been through. I wish you and your family the best of luck going forward with your life, and also the Center for Renewing America. If there's anything that our show can do to be helpful to you, please let me know. But thank you again for coming on today's show.
I appreciate the time. God bless you.